where we find ourselves today then? Because this stuff was in the 70s, lots of sort of hyperventilating, huffing and puffing, plus the sort of more yogic types techniques that are out there, the nostril breathing and this kind of thing. And it kind of went away a little bit, or it was just in the background. And then all of it recently, it seems to have come back. And I don't know if it's because it's really, it's almost like mindfulness supercharged, that people wanted something impactful. They wanted something that would change their state strongly, or is it just fashions coming and going? What's gone on with this kind of second wave? How is it similar? How is it different from the kind of stuff in the 70s?
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, my feeling is what happened in the 60s and the 70s, which I was fortunate enough to be part of, was a rather jerky, desperate, urgent wish to refuse the legacy that we were given and to try create something else. So we had love, make love, not war, and a lot of other concepts that we celebrated that was great in some ways and caused a lot of damage in others. But in terms of the awakenings that happened, especially with psychedelics and psychotropics, I think it left many people kind of out there. A lot of people never really brought it home and put it into practice. However, I have great respect for them because they took great risks. They didn't really know what was going to happen, but they did create a certain context for the rest of humanity to move into later on. So it was kind of like a seed planted and also ridiculed by many and excommunicated by many, but still a seed planted. And then I think what's happened since then is that the world condition has become so much more transparent in view of our media and our communication systems. And maybe it was as messy as it was then. Now, I don't know. To me, it seems messier now. Maybe it's just because we hear more and we get to see more detail, but that's someone else to judge that one. But I do believe that what's happened in the wake of this tremendous shift towards plant medicines and psychotropics being used in a slightly more conscious way, that people want to bring it home now. They're not just seeking to get high. They want to bring it back into the body. And how can I make this work in my life? How can I really create a pivotal moment in my life? And I think that's the distinction to me.
We're having almost like a 60s 2.0, and it almost got launched in the 90s after the sort of, the sort of greed and consumerism of the 80s. And then it kind of like wasn't quite, the environmental movement, came back in the 90s in a big way when I was growing up. And it was kind of grunge and it was druggy, but it wasn't quite consciousness expanding. It was more hard drugs and other things. And now it seems like, okay, the movement I see is almost like differentiation in the 60s and reintegration now, that kind of move. And also, as you say, an emphasis from state chasing to, and I think that's still present in modern psychedelics. And there's an extremeness to a lot of modern breath work. And people say, okay, have you done this? Oh, no, I've done the 7-day intensive in the Polish mountains with, and I did that fasting. Oh, okay, I did that on Abbagnano fasting in the Himalayas. There is still this sort of almost competitive, like, fucking hell, guys, what happened to just doing mindfulness of breath for 10 minutes in the morning, But it does seem like there's been this, but there is still some sense of like normal people do breath work now. My colleague Alison's a breath worker, and she was in the corporate world, and she still sort of, does corporate coaching and kind of looks the part. She didn't drop out and go to Nepal. So yeah, I'm thinking out loud here, Anthony. I hope you don't mind, because I'm sort of trying to get my thing's always making sense of the whole embodiment world, because I'm privileged to get to interview so many people.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I've done a lot of work with the Psychedelic Society, and I work a lot with addictions and trauma, and I also work with a lot of people who've had traumatic experiences, let's say, with the plant medicines. And it reminds me of a story that I was told by a shaman from Peru who when I asked him, I said, well, what do you think? Because my experience with plant medicines was back in, 1988 or something, when I was in Brazil and drinking ayahuasca a lot and took my son there for his 21st birthday. But I asked this shaman in Peru, I said, what do you think about this being commodified now? And he said, the situation is so urgent that it's okay.
Like it has to be.
The way it's being used, but it has to be used. Yeah, because if it's not used, people are not going to wake up like they need to.
Yeah.
And that kind of resonates for me. I don't like to see the damage, but we need that kind of a wake-up call.
Yeah, and there's a way in which things have to be kind of packaged and branded in the modern world just to get out there. Like I've been very big on teaching business skills to a lot of my students, because I'm just like, look, if you do something good, I want this to be out there in a way. And, it's like we're having these skills used against us psychologically by people with no interest in our well-being. We should know some of these skills ourselves, so there's a sort of guerrilla kind of element to it. And how do we make sense of it now? Because as you said, there's all these different schools, and I don't have anything bad to say about any of them. To be honest, the ones I've come across have all been good. And I'm doing Max Strom's breathing course, and I had Dan Brulé on the show the other day, and I've done Wim Hof for a while, and I've had good experiences with all of them. But what I'm left with now is sort of going, okay, I've got half an hour before I start work. I want to do a bit of breath work in the morning. Maybe I've got a weekend off in a month that I can do a workshop on. I've got choices. So how do I make sense of this sort of rainforest of techniques we now find ourselves in?
Well, I think the first step is to make a commitment to become intimate with the breath. And then the next step is to become intimate with what it brings, because it brings all kinds of things. So if we understand the benefit of the breath in a given situation, like the Wim Hof breath, which is really quite simple and straightforward and quick to get a result with, and we're impressed enough with the breath, then perhaps we can be more inquisitive as to the other types that are available as well and move towards using them and applying them. So what we do and what my students are trained to do is to get people to apply their breathwork experience in order to be able to embody the intellect rather than getting too heady. The breath state actually starts to close down some of those motor mechanisms of the monkey mind, and allows us to consider things in a slightly more ample way. And so the way we like to use it is to give exercises or themes, ask questions. We use a lot of inquiry, and then encourage someone to have a breath session, and afterwards to ask them how they feel about that inquiry. And what is happening is that people are getting pivotal moments of awakening that they can then begin to apply afterwards. So I usually say it's not really what happens in the session, it's what you're going to do with it in between sessions.
Yes. And this is very much something I'm interested in, is off the mat or off the cushion, depending on the art, if it's aikido or yoga or meditation, that this idea of actually how do we bring it into our lives. I do see a danger of almost a kind of consumerism in this, so as I kind of survey the different techniques, I get my bag of favorites, and I test them out, and I'm literally testing them on my brain waves and my blood oxygenation and my heart rate. I've got a few little machines I can measure them on, as well as subjectively, I feel good after that, or, I feel relaxed. And then I get okay, this one's good for relaxation, this one's good for waking up, this one's kind of a bit trippy if I want to kind of, some new ideas. But it just becomes like another way to manipulate myself. It's almost like I'm operating from utterly the wrong paradigm. Now, and I think that's maybe potentially a stage to go through. You learn skills, you use those skills, they're practical. I'm a practical guy. It's nice to have a way to energize myself in the morning. It's nice to have a way to relax at night. But I wonder if there isn't a slightly deeper paradigm, as you say, getting intimate with the breath, rather than simply sort of, do my will breath. I have decided it's time to wake up, therefore. You know what I mean? Like, that just seems like I'm sort of in the wrong paradigm a little bit if I'm in that paradigm. I'm thinking out loud here because I've been playing with a lot of this stuff lately.
Well, I think it's definitely better than not manipulating your breath and kicking it around. I mean, I think that's magnificent if we can do that. And it comes is that we don't have to make those kind of conscious choices. It just becomes more natural as you keep doing it. You just fall into a breath pattern when something happens. at a time like this where anxiety is on the rise, when people, or has been, perhaps a little less now, but at a time like this when anxiety is prevalent in our lives, it's a great. I've seen Max Strom's course on anxiety, and we're doing one ourselves. I'm producing one this month on anxiety, and the demand is incredible. So, but honestly, the secret is half the job is done if you decide to breathe. If you make that your first choice in any given moment, you don't really need all the training, honestly. Just that alone is the big secret. And so if we can just take that choice, especially if we're in a dangerous situation, and this is the crux of my work, is I'm passionate about this because I want people to take the breath back to where they lost it in the first place, because that's where the damage was done. When you were a kid and you got hit or hurt or abused or shocked, you lost your breath. And at that point, something gets embodied. At that point, that gets stuck in the body. And the beauty of the breath is that when we do give it our attention and when we can master its usage or dance with it, we can actually unlock those things that have been in there for a lifetime and be free.
Yeah, it seems like some people, I saw a little bit of this in Mac's work and what I saw some of yours online there, as well as doing the state shifting, they're also interested in what could be called therapeutic work or shadow work. Yeah. It seems like some people are doing breath primarily as this will wake you up or calm you down. And some people are doing it more as a healing modality. Like that does seem to be a difference between different schools that I've come across.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely of the latter. Lots of shadow work, lots of inner child. That's why Jamie and I get along. Lots of shadow work, lots of inner child work. Very much about, to me, the concept of embodiment in my profession is bringing all the broken parts of myself into integrity again. How can I possibly contemplate things like oneness if I'm broken inside? How can my outer world, ever bring me peace? So it's about all those things that we point the finger outwards with blame or seek outwards for solutions. How many of those can I actually find in my own body, in my own process? So it's kind of an inside out job.
And there are certain dangers in this, right? Like I've seen a few people that have done like a lot of psychedelics or a lot of breath work who have sort of had their head blown off a little bit by it, they've been just kind of a bit weird. Some people who have been, particularly they do a lot of the faster breath work, they seem a bit pumped, like almost a bit hyper. And I'm pretty ADHD, so if I'm saying that, they're definitely, revving a pretty fast engine. And then others who seem almost like slightly control freaks, because it is to learn control over one's primary process is quite it's empowering, but simultaneously, I think there's almost like this. What would be the word, like somatic fascism, this kind of call to control your own body in a certain way, or objectifying even when, I found myself the other day wired up to a brainwave monitor, heart rate variability thing on my ear and a blood oxygenation thing on my finger. And I thought, hang on, I feel like Dolph Lundgren out of Rocky IV, kind of being like if I had like an East German scientist pumping me with drugs simultaneously, it's potentially objectifying. So they're just a few. I mean, maybe this is just my friends, Anthony. Have you come across any of these sort of things?
What these experiences, you mean?
Well, the people that had their heads blown off by it, people that are a bit hyper and don't listen to anyone, people who are a bit weird. I mean, some of these, are these all sort of common dangers on the path?
Oh, I think there's a lot of, to me, part of our human condition is that we're separated from the womb and we're separated from something all the time. We always want something else. And I think that often what I see happen with people who are not able to hold the experience of a psychedelic is that they become even more separate from themselves. So I would treat that kind of condition very differently than I would someone who was ready to expand and explore out there in the unknown, because these guys have already done it and they've probably got some very big doses in a very short time of what they didn't know before. And that's a lot to fit into this tiny skull that we've got. So it's like, break it down, take it breath by breath. And is there any purpose going out there and harvesting more than we can bring back in our basket? really. It's a question of measure and appropriateness.
I really like that metaphor, Anthony. I hope you don't mind. I might take that. That can we, harvest what we can actually take in our basket and digest. Sometimes I use it as a metaphor.
Yeah.
But I think this is another thing that's changed since the 60s and 70s. It's like a little bit safer, a little bit safer. Like, hey, if you're like, I was watching one of your videos and there was a note there to say, hey, if you suffer from schizophrenia, you might not want to do this. And I was like, I really like that. I was like, okay, this guy's thought this through and he's taking care of some people out there, who might be counter-indicated to the particular thing you were teaching. And I really like that when I saw that. And I thought, that's smart and kind. And that seems to be happening a little bit more with breath work and psychedelics.
I think it is. I think there is more care. And even in the world of the plant medicines, I think there's more care than there used to be.